What are your hopes for the Republican Party as we move out of 2022 in the midterms towards the 2024 presidential election? If you had a best case scenario for what the Republican Party does in the next 2 years, what would that look like?
Well, I hope that what we'll do is, in Congress at least, which is where I'll be serving, I hope that we will be putting forward an alternative agenda that will be along the lines that we've just discussed. I hope that we'll come forward and we'll say, we want to give you more control over your kids' education. You ought to be able, for instance, to know what your kids are being taught. You ought to be able to have a say in that. You ought to be able to have control over your kids' curriculum. We want to give you more control and more opportunity economically. We want to bring back good paying jobs to this country. We want to strengthen the family. We want to reward you for having kids, not punish you for having kids. I propose a Jordan legislation that would give parents, working parents, a massive tax cut if they stay together and have kids. And I think what we ought to be saying is, it's not just that we shouldn't be penalizing you for being married. We ought to be rewarding you. If you get married and having a family, you are contributing to society. You ought to get the benefit of that. We should be explicitly rewarding that and strengthening families, strengthening marriage, strengthening kids. So I hope that we'll put forward an agenda that's focused on that. As an alternative, Joe Biden, of course, is going to be president for the next 2 years. We need to not just be stopping what he's doing, although in my view, that's very important, but we need to be putting forward an alternative that fundamentally contrasts with the campaign of nihilism that he and the left are attempting to foster. So I hope that's what we'll do. And I think if we do that, we'll go into 2024 and we'll be able to offer the country two fundamentally different visions.
What do you think is going to happen on the leadership front?
I don't know the answer to that. Listen, if I had to predict, I would say Donald Trump is giving every indication that he will run again, and I think that he'll be the nominee. I mean, I haven't asked him directly if he's going to run, but I think he is, Jordan. I mean, he's said it publicly. I'd be very surprised at this point if he didn't. So I think that he will be the nominee, and I hope that if he is the nominee, that he will put forward an agenda that will be focused on the best of what he did as president. And I think the best of what he did as president was he focused on bringing back American jobs. He focused on trying to strengthen the economic conditions of the working class and the middle class. And he tried to defend American culture. Those are good things. I hope that he will put forward a positive agenda that will do that and will seek to move the country forward to a position of strength. And, we'll see. I mean, we'll see
Who do you see as potential contenders against Trump in the primaries? Do you think DeSantis will throw his hat in the ring?
I don't know the answer to that. I sort of doubt it. I mean, my feeling is that if Trump wants to be the nominee, he will be the nominee. And I think that most folks probably think that. So I would be, listen, I don't know Governor DeSantis personally, so I couldn't speculate. I'd be a little surprised if any serious presidential contender decided to run if Trump ran, because I think it would be almost certain defeat. But who knows? I could be wrong. And 2 years is a long time. I mean, the primaries
it is.
Won't kick off for over a year and a half. I mean, that's an eternity in politics. So who knows?
And what do you think the immediate necessities, let's say, are that are going to confront a Republican Congress and a Republican Senate, assuming that that's the way things turn out in the midterms? What would you like to see happen on the political front in the short to medium term?
Well, I think one of the things we have to look at immediately is energy in the United States, Jordan, and the rampant inflation that is. You talk about just cutting the guts out of the working people and their families. This rampant inflation that this government has given us is doing that. And energy costs are a huge part of that. Joe Biden, when he came to office, on one of the first things he did, Jordan, the series of executive orders he signed, you talk about power, the president has a lot of it. He shut down new oil and energy production in this country. He canceled existing leases. He stopped the future issuance of leases on federal lands, which is a huge part of our oil production. We need to reverse all of those policies. I mean, we need to be a pro-energy production in this country. To me, to see the president go from country to country and getting down and begging these dictators to increase oil production because we won't produce it in the United States of America is insane. It is the definition of insanity.
Mm-hmm. Flirting with Iran, flirting with Venezuela, going cap in hand to the Saudis while also playing moral tricks on them. Yeah, that was really quite spectacular. Canceling the Keystone pipeline system,
Exactly.
which of course grated on Canadian sensibility, except perhaps, well, I would say even on the sensibility of our Prime Minister, interestingly enough. So, yeah, well, it's also the case, we might point out too, that America is one of the only countries that has managed to cut carbon dioxide output, and that was mostly a consequence of fracking, which isn't something that the environmentalists would have ever, first of all, predicted or certainly not trumpeted once it happened. And so it's certainly possible that a US that's dynamic in relationship to its energy production could be a net force for good, even on the environmental front. I think that's almost certain. And as well as on the economic front, particularly in relationship to the finances of the poorest people, because they're so dependent on energy.
That's right. And I just don't know two things about that. The first thing is, I don't know why you would want countries, dictatorships like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and others, to be reaping the benefit of the billions and probably eventually trillions of dollars of energy production that we are foregoing, and have it benefiting their dictatorships. I also don't know why you'd want countries that, to your point, don't have the same environmental standards, have lower environmental standards than the United States have. Why should they be the ones who are producing all the world's energy? But finally, why shouldn't American workers? This energy agenda, Biden's climate agenda, is a deeply anti-worker agenda. They are telling the men who work the rigs, the men who work the pipelines, they put them out of work. The men who go down into the coal mines, put them out of work in favor of buying oil from Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and Iran. It is just crazy. And so I think that in the short term, a fundamental cornerstone of a pro-worker agenda, frankly, pro-America agenda, is we have got to turn on American energy production and put American workers back to work. The other thing, Jordan, we have to do is crime in this country. It is just at stratospheric levels. And you talk about the basic fabric of society. If a mom can't send her kids out to go, get a gallon of milk at the local gas station, if they can't go wait for the bus on the corner and not be afraid they're going to get shot at, you have a problem. And that's increasingly where we are in many cities today in America. We have got to restore some basic respect for the rule of law, and that's not hard. Listen, I'm a former prosecutor. That means you prosecute criminals, you put them behind bars, and you reward those who follow the law. And we've got to start doing that. And why isn't Joe Biden doing it? It's because, once again, they think that the criminal justice system is systemically racist, and therefore we shouldn't prosecute criminals, that there's something wrong with that. Well, there isn't something wrong with that. There's something good about punishing those who do wrong, rewarding those who do right. And I think a basic thing Republicans have got to do is we have got to say we're going to get serious about crime and restore some basic safety to families in this country.